Thank you so much for being with us today. First of all, I would like to ask you about the news that broke today. Actually, New York Times is saying that there are debates inside of White House about letting Ukraine shoot U.S. weapons into Russia. And Secretary Blinken thinks that this is necessary, that this is time to let Ukraine use U.S. weapons for that. What do you think about that?
So I'm not going to talk about internal debates inside the administration. That's always been the case. We don't talk about our policy making as it goes on. What I will say is that we continue to be committed to the defense of Ukraine. The United States has provided over $140 billion in security assistance and have worked to put together a coalition of countries that are committed to the defense of Ukraine and committed to holding Russia accountable for its actions. That said, we have been clear that our policy when it comes to strikes inside Russia is that we don't encourage and we don't enable those strikes. Ultimately, however, Ukraine does have to make its own decisions, but with respect to U.S.-provided materials, that has been our policy.
Yes, but after the visit of Secretary Blinken to Ukraine, has he changed his mind? Did he see something that has impressed him deeply?
As I said, I'm just not going to talk about internal policy. The secretary said the same thing when we were there in Ukraine, and he was asked this question by Ukrainian journalists. Our policy is that we don't encourage, we don't enable strikes inside Russia, but that doesn't mean we aren't committed to Ukraine's defense and committed to rushing security assistance, including to the front lines outside Kharkiv. The recently passed supplemental, which provided $60 billion in new assistance, that assistance is already flowing. We know some of it has made it to the front lines, and we are committed to continuing to get Ukraine the air defense, the artillery systems, the other equipment it needs to defend itself and repel the Russian aggression.
If we don't talk about the internal debate, I understand your position. Still, there is a question of the prospects. So Vladimir Zelensky today, again, underlined how important it is to get the weapons that can help Ukraine. In Kharkiv, today, 6 people died because of the Russian strike. So do you think that there is a possibility of some changes from this point of view?
So we continue to work to provide Ukraine additional air defense systems. And it's not just a question for the United States, it's a question for our allies and partners. I can tell you in the meeting that the secretary just had with President Zelensky and then with Foreign Minister Kuleba, we had specific conversations about where we could find air defense systems. It's something that happens in nearly every meeting we have with our Ukrainian counterparts, where we look at what it is they need, what it is that we can provide, and what it is that we might be able to source from other countries. And that is an ongoing conversation. There are air defense systems that we are providing to the front lines, not just the systems, but also interceptors. Those have been flowing. They will continue to flow. But we do know that they need additional air defense systems. We just have this problem where it is the true, unfortunately, that the Patriot systems, for example, are in short supply around the world. Doesn't mean we don't stop trying to work to provide them, but they're very tough to come by. And so we are working literally every day to find Patriot systems, to find other air defense systems that Ukraine can put to use. And I'll say that has been our record over the past 2 years, is providing Ukraine the air defense systems they need. And we'll continue to be in contact with them. And as I said, with the coalition that we have assembled to support Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. So, Matt, we saw President Zelensky talking about the threat that is coming in terms of Kharkiv, including, and this is the second largest city in Ukraine. Do you think, after this visit to Ukraine, do you think there is a possibility of Kharkiv's occupation? Is there a threat this big?
We believe that the Russian offensive against Kharkiv will ultimately fail. We've seen the Ukrainians stabilize the front lines in recent days. Obviously, Russia is launching a brutal assault on Kharkiv now, as they previously did, as they have against other Ukrainian cities, as they continue to do along the eastern front lines, as well as through missile attacks and drone attacks on other cities and towns and villages throughout Ukraine. But ultimately, we have faith in the Ukrainian military to continue to push back the Russian assault. And we are going to continue to support them in those efforts, and not just, as I have said a number of times, not just on behalf of the United States, but I think it's important to remember that there is a coalition of countries around the globe, over 50 countries working together to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs to defend itself against Russian aggression. We've also seen the Ukrainians recently launch a new mobilization, which will help rotate troops and refresh troops, which will be helpful not just in the battle for Kharkiv, but elsewhere along the front lines.
Okay, and going back to the discussion in the U.S., considering the strikes on the objects that are on the territory of Russian Federation, I saw this conversation inside the discussion, I would say, inside the U.S. Congress. So it's not only internal. I mean, it's open, right? We can see that there are congressmen who are asking questions, and I would like to understand, honestly, what are the reasons for the hesitation of the White House. I mean, what is the problem with this kind of strikes on the Russian territory? If we talk about the military objects, is there a threat of some kind of big answer, dangerous answer from Vladimir Putin? Or what are the reasons, if you could tell me, of the hesitation of Biden?
So let me first of all, I don't want to speak to, again, internal deliberations, but I will say that
but it's not
when it comes to
making,
with respect to Congress, that's a different branch of government, of course, and they're free to say what they want, and they always do. I will say that with respect to what Ukraine does when it comes to striking inside Russian territory, ultimately those are decisions for them to make. But we just have a policy when it comes to U.S. provided weapons that we do not allow them for that use. That said, I don't think anyone should doubt our commitment to Ukraine's defense. And if you look at our record over the past 2 years, it has been one of standing by Ukraine's side, in rallying the free world to come to Ukraine's defense, in providing system after system to defend themselves, not just air defense systems, but artillery, advanced missiles, advanced weaponry, intelligence that they can use to help maximize the ability of their own military. So we will make no apologies for the support that we have given to Ukraine throughout this conflict. We will continue to have discussions about whether that support needs to evolve and whether that needs to change and whether there are additional capabilities that we can provide them. That is a conversation that has been going on from the beginning. But when you look at the commitment of the United States to Ukraine's defense and to holding Russia accountable for its aggression, I don't think that can in any way be questioned.
I can see that, of course. And tell me, please, Matt, is there a plan of participation of President Biden in this peace summit in Switzerland? There is planned in June, as I understand.
So I don't have any announcements to make today, but I can tell you, as we told President Zelensky when we met with him in Kyiv last week, that we fully support the Ukrainian peace formula. We support their efforts, and there will be robust participation from the United States at that meeting.
The last question, if you don't mind. So if we talk about the situation on the ground in Ukraine, it's complicated. Everybody admits that. Do you think that our some kind of situation when the United States could start negotiations with the Russian Federation in terms of the war, ending the war, ceasefire, something like that? Which terms should happen to start this kind of negotiations?
So I would say ultimately that is a question for the government of Ukraine. We leave those decisions to Ukraine. We will be there to support them. We will be there to back them. And if there's a productive role that the United States can play, we will, of course, will play it. But ultimately, you've heard us say before, no decisions about Ukraine without Ukraine. It is up for them to decide if and when they want to start such negotiations. But I will say, to have that kind of negotiation, you have to have a willing partner on the other side. And so far, we have seen no indication that Vladimir Putin has retreated at all from his maximalist objectives, from his objective to conquer all of Ukraine and subjugate the Ukrainian people and overthrow the Ukrainian government. And so it's tough to even talk about negotiations when you have an opponent on the other side who continues to want to overthrow a democratically elected government and subjugate a free people.
I was wondering, why do you think that Vladimir Putin is a legitimate president of Russian Federation? There were some kind of discussions about that. Why did the U.S. decide that he is the legitimate president of the country?
So certainly there were not free and fair elections in Russia. We made that clear. The Russian people have not had the ability to express their democratic will. They've seen President Putin crack down on that ability, not just in the last 2 years since this war began, but over the course of the last more than a decade, where you've seen an increasing, as I don't have to tell you, you know better than anyone, increasing crackdown on freedom. But ultimately, he is the president of the president of Russia. He will continue to be the president of Russia, but that in no way changes the fact that he is not the president through the result of a free and fair election.
All right. Thank you so much for this conversation, and good to have you on TV Rain, Matt.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.